Hi class, in this recording we're going to focus on the anatomy and histology of the esophagus and stomach. So let's first dive in and talk about the esophagus. I get to get the esophagus because it's kind of like a food tube. So I'm going to go back up here and just look at the digestive system as a whole and look at alimentary canal. So as we look at our esophagus, the esophagus is going to carry food from the pharynx, in particular the laryngopharynx, and it's going to carry that food all the way down to our stomachs, where the food can be stored and go through some mechanical digestion and some chemical digestion. Now, while we're looking at the esophagus, I want you guys to be able to recognize the gastroesophageal junction. Gastro is a root word meaning stomach, and this is going to be an interface between the stomach and the esophagus. So I'm going to pull it up here in Histology Guide. And the part that we're focusing on in this histology slide, let me zoom in, is going to be right here, directly in between this, where the esophagus enters into the stomach. So that's what we're focusing on our microscope slide. So that's what we have in our field of view right here. And while we're looking at this, on one side, we have a simple columnar epithelium with many, many goblet cells. So that little light patch right there, that's an individual goblet cell. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 individual goblet cells that I just counted out. And this tissue, this simple columnar epithelium with many goblet cells, here's a really good stereotypical view. This is going to be the stomach, the tissue that lines the stomach. In particular, it's the mucosa of the stomach. And let's zoom out and focus on the esophagus. Over here is the esophagus, and the tissue of the esophagus is a stratified squamous epithelium. So we have many layers of flattened cells. As a reminder, when we talk about the tissues and we're in tissue morphology with the epithelial tissues, we focus on the surface layer or apical layer. So we have a stratified squamous epithelium right here. Notably, though, you can see the nuclei. This stratified squamous epithelium is going to be a non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Your big clue is you can see the nuclei of the squamous cells in those apical or superficial layers. And then right where the two merge together, I find this to be very satisfying. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. Here we go. You can see a nice tight interface. We have the esophagus to the right side of my screen. We have the stomach to the left side of my screen. And then right in the middle, right there, is the transition, the change in tissue morphology, or the change in the histology. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in right there. So to the right, we have a stratified squamous epithelium that is non-keratinized. And then to the left over here on this side, we have our simple columnar epithelium of the stomach. So this right here in our field of view is a very zoomed in view of the gastroesophageal junction, where I could zoom out a little bit more for you so you can better see that. I think that's pretty special. Pretty dang cool. So that's the esophagus. Let's move on to the stomach. So as we look at our stomach is going to have, it's kind of the food bag. It stores foods that we don't have to be constantly eating. We can fill up our stomach and then slowly digest the food as it leaves the stomach. As we look at our stomach, it has some regions that I want to focus on. We don't have those regions in this view highlightable, so I'm just going to go ahead and annotate our screen so you can see those regions. First, we have the cardiac region. That cardiac region is going to be right here near the heart. So when we think cardiac region, it's the region that's close to the heart or where the esophagus drains into the stomach. That's our cardiac region. We also have a fundus or fundic region. If we look at where the esophagus enters into the stomach, give me a moment here. I'll go ahead and zoom in a skosh. We can see a region of the stomach that goes superior to the esophagus. This region that bulges superior to the esophagus or superior to the entry point, that's going to be the fundic region of the stomach. I know, notably, there's another organ, particularly in the female anatomy, that has a fundic region, and that's the uterus, the fundic region of the uterus. But we're not focusing on the reproductive system right now, so we're going to focus on just the stomach and the digestive system. So that's the fundic region of the stomach. Let me clear the screen here, and I'll go back to the lab objective list just to make sure I don't get off topic here. So we have the cardiac or cardial region of the stomach, we have the fundic region of the stomach, and next we have the body. The body of our stomach is going to make up the bulk of our stomach. So from here down to here, this main region of the stomach is the main body. And then finally, we have our last region right here, the pyloric region of the stomach, in red. So we talked about the cardiac, the fundic, or the cardial region, the fundic region, the body, main body, and then the pyloric region of our stomach. Now, while we're looking at the pyloric region, there's some subregions that I want to focus on for us. So let's zoom in on that pyloric region. First, we have the pyloric sphincter, and I want to emphasize here that it's a sphincter, and I don't like how Visible Body calls it a valve, because this pyloric sphincter is just a muscle that squeezes off the stomach, the drain for the stomach. And we can have two-directional flow of fluid. Usually, thankfully, most of the time, fluid will flow one direction. It'll flow from the stomach into the small intestine. So most of the time it's going this direction. But anyone who's ever had a really bad case of gastroenteritis or just vomited a lot knows that if you vomit enough, you can have backwards flow. Bile and chyme from the small intestine can flow backwards into the stomach, and then you can vomit that up when you're dry heaving. It's a very unpleasant experience. So that's the pyloric sphincter that will close off the hole, the opening. And as we look at this opening here, I don't believe Visible Body will let me select the opening per se. Nope, it won't. I want to emphasize spelling here. The pylorus, US, is the opening enclosed by the pyloric sphincter. So this opening, this space right here, is the pylorus, the opening that drains from the stomach into the duodenum of the small intestine. And there's one last component of the pyloric region that we need to cover, and that's the pyloric canal. Our pyloric canal is going to drain, it's the narrowing, it's kind of the funnel of the pyloric region, draining chyme from the stomach directly into the pylorus, the opening surrounded by the pyloric sphincter. So as we look at the wall of the stomach, we're going to have some muscular tissue, and notably there's 3 layers to the muscular tissue. This is an exception. The alimentary canal typically will have 2 layers of muscular tissue, a longitudinal and a circular layer. But the stomach does a fair amount of mechanical digestion, and to aid it with that mechanical digestion, we have 3 layers. The most superficial layer right here is the longitudinal layer. The middle layer is the circular layer, and here's the bonus layer, the oblique inner layer of smooth muscle of the stomach. So when you're looking at the stomach, it's a muscular bag. And then lining the stomach, there's a mucosa that has a lot of folds to it. So as I click on that mucosa, looks like I can't select individual ones, but I'm going to go ahead and annotate them. We can see these individual folds on the inner lining of the stomach. Those individual folds are referred to as gastric rugae. A rugae is just a folding of a tissue. And the rugae allow for the stomach to expand. When the stomach is distended or you eat too much and you're feeling really full, the rugae are stretched out and become smooth as the stomach is inflated with food or filled with food. And then when you have an empty stomach, the stomach will start to collapse back in on itself and the rugae, gastric rugae, will reform. Let's talk about the tissue, the histology of the stomach. Tissue that lines the stomach is a simple columnar epithelium. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up on Histology Guide for us. So here is just a view of the stomach, a cross-section of the stomach. You might recognize this from this slide as our gastroesophageal junction, but I'm just going to focus on the stomach side right now. So here we can see our simple columnar epithelium, which makes up the mucosa or mucous membrane of our stomach. So there I highlighted a segment of that simple columnar epithelium. Let me go ahead and pull that down here. There we go, that's better. Now within that simple columnar epithelium, we have gastric pits and gastric glands. And as we look at the gastric pits themselves, they are going to be surface invaginations formed by the mucous cells. So here are some transversely sliced gastric pits. As we go to a different view, let me go ahead and focus over here. Here's a longitudinally sliced gastric pit. And what is neat about these gastric pits is that these gastric pits are going to have continue deep down into the stomach, forming the gastric glands. So let me pull that up on our screen. So as we look at the gastric glands, they're going to be the deep, deep invaginations as opposed to the shallower invaginations. So let's transition on our view here. Here's a great view highlighting the difference between a gastric pit and a gastric gland. So right here, up here we have a gastric pit, and then down here we have gastric glands that extend far deep down into the stomach. So as we look at the gastric gland itself, there are some cell types associated with the gastric glands that we want you to recognize. Those cell types are the parietal cell, chief cell, and enteroendocrine cell. And we listed them in order of depth. So as we look at these cell types, the parietal cells are the cells that have the pink cytoplasm and the dark purple nucleus. And we tend to have a higher concentration of the parietal cells near the surface of the gastric pit. And then we have these cells right here that have a purple cytoplasm and a purple nucleus. Those are the chief cells. The parietal cells are known for producing hydrochloric acid. The chief cells are known for producing pepsinogen. And then the third cell type, the enteroendocrine cell, is more difficult to find. We have to look at the deep end of the gastric pit. and look for a cell type that has a clear cytoplasm and a dark purple nucleus. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. I have to hunt and peck for a while to find the enteroendocrine cells, and for the sake of time in this video recording, I am probably going to need to punt and click on the hyperlink, but before I do that, here we go, here's one. So note the clear band. We have a purple nucleus right here, and there's a faint clear band around that purple nucleus. That's an enteroendocrine cell. I'm not terribly pleased with that one, though. That's a lower quality enteroendocrine cell, at least from my opinion. So let's see if I can find you guys a better looking one. I'll spend just a few more moments scanning this view. Ooh, here's a beauty. Here's a great enteroendocrine cell. This guy right here. You can see how there's the clearer cytoplasm and that dark purple nucleus. So we have an enteroendocrine cell surrounded by chief cells. That's a beautiful one right there. Very happy looking. So that's the histology of the stomach. So we covered in this video the esophagus and the stomach, both the anatomy and the histology. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them in the class discussion board or to shoot me an email. And as always, happy studies.